Hey, how's it going guys? My name is Zealwood and today we are looking at Blasphemous, a game just recently released on pretty much all platforms, and to answer the ultimate question, is it worth your time? So, Blasphemous is a single-player, pixel art, hack-and-slash action platformer where you play as a guy known as the Penitent One. Set in a hardcore religious world it seems, your quest is extremely vague due to the very heavy use of old Shakespearean English. Combine this with an overzealous righteousness game concept. I honestly didn't have a clue what was going on. So, aesthetically, considering Blasphemous is a pixel art game, the visuals are fucking incredible. Everything on the foreground looks stunning, backgrounds are impressive, and the bosses are on a completely different level of visual quality that you almost never see in a pixel art game, which I can imagine took considerably longer to design compared to other pixel art games these days. Colours used are surprisingly bright for a game full of abominations, blood and gore, definitely giving the game a more artistic feel, especially when combined with the very nice background designs. Everything has a very high level of texture and detail. Foreground assets like characters, projectiles, obstacles, ground and wall designs stand out very well, yet never seeming out of place, with plenty of detail to distinguish materials and textures of the various areas in the game. Light effects aren't exactly present in Blasphemous, well, none that interact with the environment anyway, but for the light graphic effects they have, like candle, lantern and torchlight, are somewhat decent. The level of ground clutter throughout the game is nice. In some areas it can be a bit excessive, but overall a decent immersive amount. The UI is good, everything you need to know in a tidy professional arrangement on the screen. No hindrance on your focus area at all, and they even threw in a visual effect on your magic bar, which is nice. A few more visual effects would have been better though, I'd say. Level layouts are good, each area is somewhat memorable, but I found a lot of the more larger areas are a bit of a nightmare to navigate, and in some places a pain in the ass. Character designs are, as I said, very impressive, superb animations and exceptional designs for all characters, enemies and especially the bosses. If I were to nitpick, the Penitent One's ladder ascending does look a bit too optimistic for the character's design, and dodging does have a few seconds cooldown which they should have acknowledged in the form of an extended animation, which they haven't. Everything else though is seriously outstanding. Attack, magic and death animations of all characters are pretty top notch, with boss designs being fucking insane. You can even perform executes at certain times on enemies, which are a prime example of exceptional animation design that never gets old. The overall aesthetics of Blasphemous give the game a very strong feeling of unease, discomfort and unsettledness, mainly due to the impressively creepy enemy designs, the game's concept, and your character's questionable motives, but fortunately without taking away from the level of visual immersion whatsoever. Who wouldn't like the look of a 2D Dante's Inferno styled platformer? The OSTs in Blasphemous are overall decent, I suppose. Fully orchestrated, bold yet simple, strong yet gentle music, with each soundtrack in each area giving a different feeling of negative emotion to fit the game's concept very well, with the addition of added vocals to give the more urgent events that added oomph. Unfortunately though, they're not exactly spectacular. Other games with similar sounding music like Diablo, Hollow Knight and Dante's Inferno give a much better, simple, quality soundtrack that Blasphemous does lack unfortunately. Usually way too much going on, which causes the tracks to go in one ear and straight out the other in terms of memory. The soundtrack you hear in the Mother of Mothers Church, which I did sample, is probably the best OST in the game though. A bit of a shame they couldn't have all shared this track's simplicity and quality. Everything else sound related though is considerably higher quality. Sounds like attacking, enemy hits, deaths, underfoot texture sounds, and more are all pretty top notch and do match the visual quality very well. But as I said, a big shame that the soundtrack quality overall just isn't there. Now for the gameplay. So firstly, Blasphemous doesn't have any option for difficulty when you start. It is what it is whether you like it or not, just like every good game should be. If you haven't already noticed, the game is clearly a Metroidvania, except with many similarities to Souls platformers, like Hollow Knight. This means punishing platforming, difficult enemies, and harsh respawn and backtracking. So when you first start the game, you're given a pretty unsettling intro cutscene to introduce you to the game's very hardcore religious concept. As I mentioned, by playing the game normally, I didn't really understand the point to it, but after checking online, it's pretty much some boy prays to some sort of entity or godly energy known as the Miracle. This makes him the new Messiah, aka the last boss of the game. Turns out his rule over the world was tyrannical, mercilessly killing anyone who didn't follow his orders. The woman you see at the start of the game is actually the Messiah's mother, presumably wishing for a way to end her son's rule. You play as the penitent one, the sole survivor of the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow, which are actually tasked to kill the Messiah. He finds out about this and kills them all. That's why you're the only one left by the time you start playing the game. You take up the blade, the Mea Culpa, from the Messiah's mother's petrified body, thus starting your blasphemous journey. The reason why the enemies in the game are either deformed or in some sort of self-punishing state is because of the Miracle punishing the Messiah and his followers for the way he ruled the kingdom. But personally, I think the game devs have put some sort of game theory references to the Crusade and how people would blindly follow the corrupt orders of the religious leaders because of their promises to absolve them of sin for taking part in the Holy Crusade. Very similar to Dante's Inferno, but who knows, food for thought, eh? So once you've watched the opening cutscene, you take control of your character and play. As the penitent one wielding the Mea Culpa, you obviously have your general movement controls of course, with the addition of various melee attacks and combos, dodging, perfect guarding, magic, prayers and healing. You heal with the limited vials of bile and generate fervor, aka magic bar, from dealing damage, executing enemies and cutting yourself to convert HP into fervor. Your weapon combos deal considerably more damage the further you get into the combo chain. Dodging timed correctly can travel through enemies and projectiles, and perfectly guarding when timed correctly will stun most enemies and allow you to follow up with a very strong counter attack. Considering you only wield one weapon throughout the entire game, the customizable options for your character are pretty impressive. You have your rosary bead slots to equip many different combat passives, relics to equip non-combat passives, one Mea Culpa heart slot for a much stronger combat passive, various different prayers for your prayer button, and unlockable progressive weapon abilities. All these things do give the game plenty of variety and choice when playing, but nothing exactly game breaking. Other than your unlocked weapon abilities, they're fucking strong. As this is a Souls game, when you die you leave a sort of soul fragment at the location where you died. You surprisingly keep your currency however, but instead get a slightly reduced fervor bar. You can die multiple times and lose several parts of the bar, but don't worry about it, magic is pretty shit in this game. Too long to cast and not exactly game changing damage. Actually I lie, on one boss I did abuse the magic ability, but hardly used it everywhere else. Again, like Souls games, you rest at an altar to restore your HP, vials of bile, and now use this spot as a checkpoint. Enemies however will respawn. You have set larger shrines to upgrade your weapon abilities, very few teleportation points throughout the game, a good few puzzles around the place with a statue you've never seen before, but you'll probably have to Google it to find out what they do. There are statues to absolve your soul fragments at a price, blood fountains which fill up your vials without the need of an altar at a price, and a few less important ones that I probably missed. Your HP, magic and bile vessels are increased via drinking from hidden fervor fountains, speaking to large hidden naked women with swords in their chest, and finding additional empty vial vessels in hidden chests. Did I mention Blasphemous has lots and lots of secrets, so expect to go around attacking walls and ground pounding everything if you want to find every single collectible. Speaking of collectibles, plenty of them too. Lots of bones to find, cherubs to free, and NPCs to help via freeing them, speaking to them when certain items have been collected, and completing their short side quests. Don't ask me what doing any of these things does, as I just play the game normally without any online assistance. I've probably missed quite a lot of smaller details about the game, but from a review perspective, that should be pretty much everything you guys need to know. During my playthrough personally, I pretty much winged it and hoped for the best. I was adamant I wasn't going to Google anything, but once I completed the game I was a bit annoyed to how much I missed out on. I played my entire playthrough with just 2 rosary bead slots when I could have had 6, just because the NPC that upgrades them for you is completely way off the progression track. I could have had a lot more relics to choose from just because of silly NPC progression that I missed, as there's no way to know it through normal means. Bit of a shame, but I managed to complete the game anyway, so it's all good. Combat in Blasphemous is pretty dynamic, fun and immersive, some of the time anyway. Love hitting you into one-shot spikes or down holes, but are unfortunately very repetitive. Pretty much every enemy in the game has the exact same attack, same timing to that attack, and the same movement patterns when interacting with the player. This combined with the many annoying airborne and large unavoidable enemies, many times I would die due to stupid cheap platforming challenges, backtrack to where I died, but because I cannot be asked to take my time with the combat on the same unavoidable enemies over and over, I would die more and more because I would try to find some way, any way to get past without spending 10 to 30 seconds on each enemy to get back to where I was. This didn't happen 100% of the time, mind you, but a very generous 60%, which I got fed up with very quickly. Boss fights, however, are on a completely different level. Very fun, very difficult, and very interesting. They do make you feel very weak, however, due to the very low damage you do against most of them, and it does sometimes feel like you're forced to play like a scrub just to beat them. But fair play, the boss fights are an absolute pleasure overall, and are by far the best asset of the game. The baby boss, however, was a bit too bullshit for my liking. In the end, I had to abuse the prayer ability to get past it, but that's just down to my experience of the fight, so it's all good. So for the ultimate question, is it worth your time? The aesthetics are mind-blowing, the OSTs are decent, and the storyline sparks high interest, but the structure and execution of the game could have been a lot better. I'm going to give this game a 3.5 star, or 65 out of 100. There are plenty of things I really like about this game, but sadly there are way more things that I don't. We'll start with the small ones. When picking up items, it should really tell you what category of item it is to save you from pressing start every time you find something new. Nowhere near enough teleportation doors make general travel, which you'll be doing a lot of, feel very dated, slow and boring. The location and placement of checkpoint shrines are very amateur, and a lot of the time you will come to a room with 2 to 4 new doors, and one of them will lead to a shrine, which if you're lucky, you'll guess on your first go. You would have thought that game devs should know that checkpoints should be located before any kind of branching off into multiple rooms from the same room, or at least throw some sort of visual effects like candles or something to indicate a shrine is nearby to help the player guess correctly. That would have been a very good touch. General movement controls feel a bit too heavy. The player's dodge animation should have been extended to match its cooldown. You hardly ever feel rewarded for progressing the game normally, especially after boss fights. Prayers and magic are sadly pretty shit. If you keep dying and have no magic bar due to your deaths, don't worry about it because you're not going to need them anyway. When taking damage on the ground, the knockback you suffer is way too long and dramatic, allowing enemies and bosses to often get multiple follow-up attacks if you're unlucky. Most of your deaths in this game will come from cheap shots into one-shot spikes, cheap shots into the abyss, or poor platforming. Very rare would I die from combat mistakes unless I'm stuck on a boss, which isn't very good game design. As mentioned, the combat when backtracking is very repetitive and very boring. I played the entire game without finding the NPC to give me additional bead slots, and I didn't get my first weapon upgrade until halfway through the game, which, come on, is fucking stupid. When I got to the snow place with the wind effects, airborne bell creatures and the completely unavoidable stone monsters, fuck me, I was thinking about calling it quits and giving this game a no contest because it was that shit. Bear in mind, no new abilities at that point, no extra slots, and that was my 4th or 5th major area explored. It's never good if a game is annoying and boring to a point that you want to turn it off. But I persevered, and to be honest, late game is actually the most fun. It just feels like a lot of small, silly mistakes have been made that, when all brought together, give the game zero replayability, reward the player for playing like a scrub, and made me happy that I actually completed the game because I can now play a different one. If they halved the price of the game to £10 instead of $20, probably worth a purchase if you're curious, but personally I wouldn't recommend it. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more games I'll be reviewing each week, and if you're curious about the Blasphemous lore, I've included a link in the description to where I got my storyline information from. But as always, all the best guys, take care.